this short story video, we'll look at The Necklace by Guy de Maupassant. Now, as you might have guessed, he is a French writer. And I've got some images here. I've got the book cover, I've got the publication where the short story was published originally in Paris, and a few other images. From these, I'd like you to predict what might the story be about, what might the plot be, who might the characters be. Consider the setting, when is it set, where is it set. Consider the author's name to help you there. What might the conflicts be? Now, as we always do, as we always need, we need to look at context. So here is the author, Guy de Maupassant, French author. The story, The Necklace, was written in 1884, where it was published in a magazine in Paris. Guy de Maupassant was born in 1850 and died in 1893. It was first published in a Parisian newspaper, Le Gaulois. Literacy rates in Paris in the 19th century were on the rise, as they were in many parts of the world. And because of this, short stories were all the rage. They became very popular and they were published in magazines and newspapers. Now, Guy de Maupassant became very close friends with a very, very, very famous author called Gustave Flaubert. And he's the author of a story called Madame Bovary. This story is about an attractive yet dissatisfied young woman who sought to escape her place in life and aim higher. She doesn't do it. His father was a clerk, so Guy de Maupassant's father was a clerk. This is a lower middle class job of the aristocracy. He still worked for the ruling class. He's still part of office and the state and the ruling class, but it is a lower level job. Now today, office jobs like clerks are very common. Many people do these jobs from many parts of society. But in 19th century France and Europe, a clerk would have still been a very, very highly regarded job by most, but it's not the ruling class. It's very middle class. And his parents got divorced and his father left. Now, all of this adds up and is important for two literary movements of the time, realism and naturalism. But first, before realism and naturalism, romanticism was very, very popular. I've got a few examples of romantic stories with romantic heroes here. Now, romanticism, if you've watched any of the other videos, particularly poetry, you'll know it doesn't mean about being all soppy and romantic. It was a movement where authors focused on the power of nature. They shunned society and the cities and urban life. Their heroes were often tragic heroes who were shunned by society, rejected by society, but noble inside, inherently noble inside. These are stories like The Count of Monte Cristo, Victor Hugo's The Man Who Laughs. Both of those are French books. Moby Dick and The Scarlet Letter are all examples of romantic texts. Again, heroes were often noble but rejected characters by a flawed society. However, audiences moved on. What we see with literary movements is that they become very popular for a time and then the society changes and the movements reflect that, or vice versa sometimes. So society reflected this, audiences moved on, and realism became the new popular movement. Now, realism and naturalism became increasingly popular in the mid-19th century, and stories like Madame Bovary, as I mentioned before, were an example of this. Their heroes were tragic and very, very normal. As I said with Madame Bovary, she's an attractive yet dissatisfied woman who's not happy with her status in life. She's a very middle-class, normal person. She wants to do better and escape this. This is an example of realism. It seeks to focus on how the world actually is. They're not these grand stories or with really, over-the-top heroes. They're very realistic. The people often come from middle-class families with normal upbringings. They don't come from the working class like they might in Dickensian novels. They are not these super rich, flamboyant people. They're very normal middle-class people. Characters of middle class, normal jobs, normal upbringings, and normal lives. Now, this is realism. Naturalism takes this a step further, and it looks at the fact that, as humans, we have these natural instincts to desire for more and want to achieve better. However, these things often don't come true. An example, I often fantasize about becoming a billionaire like Jeff Bezos, but it's never going to happen. Um, Now, I want you to think that this story really is kind of an opposite Cinderella story. Instead of from rags to riches, it's kind of from, well, really, it's from normal clothes to less nice normal clothes. Now, there are some important terms we need to look at. The first is franc. Because the book was written in 19th century France and is set in 19th century France, there are going to be some terms you need to know. A franc was the old French currency before the euro. Now, in the novel, you'll see 40,000 francs, 40,000 francs. I've tried to work this out. It took me a while. I've done a few Google searches. I can't be certain, but from what I found on the internet, in 1880, 40,000 francs would be the equivalent of $5 million today. Now, I'm not entirely sure about that, so don't quote me on it, but that's what I found on the internet. The next is they refer to a Breton girl. Now, Breton is a term to classify people who come from Brittany. Brittany is a French province, but it's a rural province, often farmers. And so those from Brittany who moved to Paris would often work as maids and serving jobs. So in the story, when they refer to the little Breton girl, they're talking about her maid. A rue is street, and the Champs-Élysées, I can't pronounce it, is a very famous street in France. We have the Arc de Triomphe here in the center of Paris, and this street here is the I can't pronounce it, I'm not even going to try. Finally, a clerk. As we said, Maupassant's dad was actually a clerk. A clerk is a person who tracks records in an office. In 19th century France, it's still a good job. It's still a respected job, but you have to be literate. You have to be able to read and write. You have to be well educated. But it is a lower level job of the aristocracy and of the ruling class. It's one of the lowest levels of that sort of class. So it's a very middle class job. Now, when you're looking at this story, there are some things I want you to focus on. First of all, can you spot Maupassant's messages? I think there are several. I've taken away several central messages and morals and several big ideas and themes in this story. So what can you find? Next, I want you to look how poverty is described, how the wealthy are described, how wealthy people are described, how the working class are described, how the regular middle class is described, what their lives look like, how is middle class food described, and how is this related to naturalism and realism? How is juxtaposition used in the story? This is a term you will learn if you keep watching the video in my next analysis piece about halfway through. And how are the characters characterized? How does Maupassant use indirect and direct characterization? And do characters change? Again, how do the characters link to naturalism and realism? So these are the things I want you to focus on when you're reading the text. I hope you enjoy it. Good luck.
She was one of those pretty and charming girls, born as though fate had blundered over her into a family of artisans. She had no marriage portion, no expectations, no means of getting known, understood, loved and wedded by a man of wealth and distinction, and she let herself be married off to a little clerk in the Ministry of Education. Her tastes were simple because she had never been able to afford any other, but she was as unhappy as though she had married beneath her. For women have no caste or class, their beauty, grace and charm serving them for birth or family. Their natural delicacy, their instinctive elegance, their nimbleness of wit are their only mark of rank, and put the slum girl on a level with the highest lady in the land. She suffered endlessly, feeling herself born for every delicacy and luxury. She suffered from the poorness of her house, from its mean walls, worn chairs, and ugly curtains. All these things, of which other women of her class would not even have been aware, tormented and insulted her. The sight of the little Breton girl who came to do the work in her little house aroused heartbroken regrets and hopeless dreams in her mind. She imagined silent antechambers, heavy with oriental tapestries, lit by torches in lofty bronze sockets, with 2 tall footmen in knee breeches sleeping in large armchairs, overcome by the heavy warmth of the stove. She imagined vast saloons hung with antique silks, exquisite pieces of furniture supporting priceless ornaments, and small, charming, perfumed rooms, created just for little parties of intimate friends, men who were famous and sought after, whose homage roused every other woman's envious longings. When she sat down for dinner at the round table, covered with a 3-days-old cloth, opposite her husband, who took the cover off the soup tureen, exclaiming delightedly, "Aha! Scotch broth! What could be better?" She imagined delicate meals, gleaming silver, tapestries peopling the walls with folk of a past age, and strange birds in fairy forests. She imagined delicate food served in marvellous dishes, murmured gallantries, listened to with an inscrutable smile as one trifled with the rosy flesh of trout or wings of asparagus chicken. She had no clothes, no jewels, nothing. And these were the only things she loved. She felt that she was made for them. She had longed so eagerly to charm, to be desired, to be wildly attractive and sought after. She had a rich friend, an old school friend whom she refused to visit because she suffered so keenly when she returned home. She would weep whole days with grief, regret, despair, and misery. One evening her husband came home with an exultant air, holding a large envelope in his hand. "Here's something for you," he said. Swiftly she tore the paper and drew out a printed card, on which were these words: "The Minister of Education and Madame Ramponneau request the pleasure of the company of Monsieur and Madame Loisel at the Ministry on the evening of Monday, January the 18th. Instead of being delighted, as her husband hoped, she flung the invitation petulantly across the table, murmuring, "What do you want me to do with this?" "Why, darling, I thought you'd be pleased. You never go out, and this is a great occasion. I had tremendous trouble to get it. Everyone wants one. It's very select, and very few go to the clerks. You'll see all the really big people there." She looked at him out of furious eyes and said impatiently, "And what do you suppose I am to wear at such an affair?" He had not thought about it. He stammered, "Why, the dress you go to the theatre in. It looks very nice to me." He stopped stupefied and utterly at a loss when he saw that his wife was beginning to cry. 2 large tears ran slowly down from the corners of her eyes towards the corners of her mouth. "What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you?" he faltered. But with a violent effort she overcame her grief and replied in a calm voice, wiping her wet cheeks, "Nothing, only I haven't a dress, and so I can't go to this party. Give your invitation to some friend of yours whose wife will be turned out better than I shall." He was heartbroken. "Look here, Mathilde," he persisted. "What would be the cost of a suitable dress, which you could use on other occasions as well? Something very simple." She thought for several seconds, reckoning up prices and also wondering for how large a sum she could ask without bringing upon herself an immediate refusal and an exclamation of horror from the careful-minded clerk. At last she replied with some hesitation, "I don't know exactly, but I think I could do it on 400 francs. He grew slightly pale, for this was exactly the amount he had been saving for a gun, intending to get a little shooting next summer on the plain of Nanterre with some friends who went lark shooting there on Sundays. Nevertheless, he said, "Very well, I'll give you 400 francs, but try and get a really nice dress with the money." The day of the party drew near, and Madame Loisel seemed sad, uneasy and anxious. Her dress was ready, however. One evening her husband said to her, "What's the matter with you? You've been very odd for the last 3 days." "I'm utterly miserable at not having any jewels, not a single stone to wear," she replied. "I shall look absolutely no one. I would almost rather not go to the party." "Wear flowers," he said. They're very smart at this time of the year. For 10 francs you could get 2 or 3 gorgeous roses. She was not convinced. No, there's nothing so humiliating as looking poor in the middle of a lot of rich women. How stupid you are, exclaimed her husband. Go and see Madame Forestier and ask her to lend you some jewels. You know her quite well enough for that. She uttered a cry of delight. That's true. I never thought of it. Next day she went to see her friend and told her her trouble. Madame Forestier went to her dressing table, took up a large box, brought it to Madame Loisel, opened it and said, "Choose, my dear." First she saw some bracelets, then a pearl necklace, then a Venetian cross in gold and gems of exquisite workmanship. She tried the effect of the jewels before the mirror, hesitating, unable to make up her mind to leave them, to give them up. She kept on asking, "Haven't you anything else?" "Yes, look for yourself. I don't know what you would like best." Suddenly she discovered in a black satin case a superb diamond necklace. Her heart began to beat covetously. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. She fastened it round her neck, upon her high dress, and remained in ecstasy at sight of herself. Then, with hesitation, she asked in anguish, "Could you lend me this? Just this alone?" "Yes, of course." She flung herself on her friend's breast, embraced her frenziedly, and went away with her treasure. The day of the party arrived. Madame Loisel was a success. She was the prettiest woman present, elegant, graceful, smiling, and quite above herself with happiness. All the men stared at her, inquired her name, and asked to be introduced to her. All the under-secretaries of state were eager to waltz with her. The minister noticed her. She danced madly, ecstatically, drunk with pleasure, with no thought for anything, in the triumph of her beauty, in the pride of her success, in a cloud of happiness made up of this universal homage and admiration, of the desires she had aroused, of the completeness of a victory so dear to her feminine heart. She left about 4 o'clock in the morning. Since midnight, her husband had been dozing in a deserted little room, in company with 3 other men whose wives were having a good time. He threw over her shoulders the garments he had brought for them to go home in, modest everyday clothes, whose poverty clashed with the beauty of the ball dress. She was conscious of this, and was anxious to hurry away so that she would not be noticed by the other women putting on their costly furs. Loisel restrained her. "Wait a little. You'll catch cold in the open. I'm going to fetch a cab." But she did not listen to him and rapidly descended the staircase. When they were out in the street, they could not find a cab. They began to look for one, shouting at the drivers whom they saw passing in the distance.
So the first 2 pages of the story, The Necklace, introduce the main character, Madame Loisel, and there's so much characterization going on here. We can see from the first sentence alone that she's a very pretty and charming girl. However, we see fate blundered over her. There's some personification there. Fate's personified to be this human thing which kind of messes up her life. The fact that she's really pretty, but she was born to a family of sort of skilled labourers. She's not a high-class person. There's lots of talk of things like classes and caste systems, and she is described as not belonging to the caste of which she looks like she should belong to. Basically, that means she's really beautiful, but she's quite poor. She looks as though she should be with the very, very rich. She actually, it says that she married underneath her, and because of that she was really unhappy. She suffers endlessly because she feels like she's born into the wrong class or caste. When she looks at her house, when she looks at her servant, she feels really sad and heartbroken, and she imagines these huge houses with beautiful tapestries, big metallic bronze gold structures, footmen and butlers, and all these different elements that the rich have, and then she looks at what she has and compares it. She thinks about the food that she should be eating, beautiful delicate dishes and different types of birds and meat, and instead she's sitting around eating soup. She thinks about the jewels she should have, and yet she has nothing. So how does this characterize her? In what ways is she characterized? And then we see her husband. Her husband comes home. He's just a clerk. So a clerk would be someone who works in an office, deals with like documents and tracking logs and things like that. It's not a high class position. It's a very lower middle class position. And he's quite this chipper, happy fella. He comes home one day with an invitation to a ball where all the rich people will be there, and he's like, hey, look, I got this invitation, this is fantastic. And she acts like a petulant child. The word petulant has connotations with spoiled children even. She's not happy at this invitation. She's really angry and sad because she doesn't have beautiful clothes to wear. So this nice husband of hers even says, you know, I'll give you some money. How much do you want? She wants 400. This is the exact amount he'd been saving up for his own personal desires. And he's like, fine, you can have 400 to buy a dress. How is he characterized, and how is that different from her? She seems like a bit of a selfish, shallow, superficial, materialistic person who acts like a spoiled brat. He's this person who will do anything he can to help her, and is quite happy in his status in life, doesn't want more, is quite happy with what he has. So they're characterized as very, very different. And this is important because I don't know if you noticed this, but her imagination and her reality are very opposite as well. She thinks about these huge, beautiful houses and thinks about this beautiful, delicate food. In the same paragraphs, we see that she's living in her old, tired house, or that she's eating her plain soup, her broth. Now, this is a literary device known as juxtaposition. It's basically where something highlights the other. There's contrast, there's opposite to highlight one another. So we see the tired old house. In the same sort of paragraph, we see her imagining rich people's houses. We see her eating broth. In the same paragraph, we see her imagining these delicate dishes. We see her as this spoiled, a superficial person who just cares about nice things and wants more and isn't happy with her status in life, juxtaposed to her husband, who is very happy with his status in life, is very optimistic and is very excited, whereas she lives in despair. This is known as juxtaposition. Anyway, eventually she's convinced to go to this ball, and she gets upset again. She buys this dress, but she's upset again because she doesn't have any jewels to wear. Her husband says, why don't you go and ask your friend, Madame Frostier, and ask her to borrow some of her jewels. She's a rich lady and you're friends with her. Go and borrow some of her jewels. And she does. She goes around her house. She looks at all of the jewels she has, and she takes this necklace. Her heart began to beat covetously. She trembles as she lifts it. She lives in ecstasy. So it's these superficial things which give her happiness. Otherwise, she lives in despair. Now, are you starting to notice any themes develop here? Any messages or morals develop? I can see quite a few, to be honest. Eventually, they go to the ball. She's the prettiest woman there. She's drunk with pleasure. Everyone wants to dance with her. She's in a cloud of happiness. Lots of grandiose hyperbole and metaphors here. And her husband, while she's dancing, we have this thing, she's living the best life, she's dancing, she's having a good time, juxtaposed again with her husband just waiting for her, and he's happy with that. He's with 3 other things. Eventually they go to leave. He hands her modest everyday clothes. She's so embarrassed she runs away in her beautiful ball dress. She doesn't want to be seen in her old lower middle class coat. She runs outside, and they go to try to find a taxi to get home. That's where we are with the first page. Really try to think about this characterization, really try to think about the juxtaposition, and really try to see what themes are emerging here.
They walked down towards the Seine, desperate and shivering. At last they found on the quay one of those old night-prowling carriages which are only to be seen in Paris after dark, as though they were ashamed of their shabbiness in the daylight. It brought them to their door in the Rue des Martyrs, and sadly they walked up to their own apartment. It was the end for her. As for him, he was thinking that he must be at the office at 10. She took off the garments in which she had wrapped her shoulders, so as to see herself in all her glory before the mirror. But suddenly she uttered a cry. The necklace was no longer round her neck. "What's the matter with you?" asked her husband, already half undressed. She turned towards him in the utmost distress. I've no longer got Madame Forestier's necklace." He started with astonishment. What? Impossible! They searched in the folds of her dress, in the folds of the coat, in the pockets, everywhere. They could not find it. "Are you sure that you still had it on when you came away from the ball?" he asked. "Yes, I touched it in the hall at the ministry. But if you had lost it in the street, we should have heard it fall." "Yes, probably we should." "Did you take the number of the cab?" "No. You didn't notice it, did you?" "No." They stared at one another, dumbfounded. At last Loisel put on his clothes again. "I'll go over all the ground we walked," he said, "and see if I can't find it." And he went out. She remained in her evening clothes, lacking strength to get into bed, huddled on a chair, without volition or power of thought. Her husband returned about 7. He had found nothing. He went to the police station, to the newspapers, to offer a reward, to the cab companies, everywhere that a ray of hope impelled him. She waited all day long, in the same state of bewilderment at this fearful catastrophe. Loisel came home at night, his face lined and pale. He had discovered nothing. "You must write to your friend," he said, "and tell her that you've broken the clasp of her necklace and are getting it mended. That will give us time to look about us." She wrote at his dictation. By the end of the week they had lost all hope. Loisel, who had aged 5 years, declared, "We must see about replacing the diamonds." Next day they took the box which had held the necklace and went to the jeweller's whose name was inside. He consulted his books. "It was not I who sold this necklace, madame. I must have merely supplied the clasp." Then they went from jeweller to jeweller, searching for another necklace like the first, consulting their memories, both ill with remorse and anguish of mind. In a shop at the Palais Royal they found a string of diamonds which seemed to them exactly like the one they were looking for. It was worth 40,000 francs. They were allowed to have it for 36,000. They begged the jeweller not to sell it for 3 days, and they arranged matters on the understanding that it would be taken back for 34,000 francs if the first one were found before the end of February. Loisel possessed 18,000 francs, left to him by his father. He intended to borrow the rest. He did borrow it, getting 1,000 from one man, 500 from another, 5 louis here, 3 louis there. He gave notes of hand, entered into ruinous agreements, did business with usurers and the whole tribe of moneylenders. He mortgaged the whole remaining years of his existence, risked his signature without even knowing if he could honour it, and appalled at the agonizing face of the future, at the black misery about to fall upon him, at the prospect of every possible physical privation and moral torture, he went to get the new necklace and put down upon the jeweller's counter 36,000 francs. When Madame Loisel took back the necklace to Madame Forestier, the latter said to her in a chilly voice, "You ought to have brought it back sooner. I might have needed it." She did not, as her friend had feared, open the case. If she had noticed the substitution, what would she have thought? What would she have said? Would she not have taken her for a thief? Madame Loisel came to know the ghastly life of abject poverty. From the very first, she played her part heroically. This fearful debt must be paid off. She would pay it. The servant was dismissed. They changed their flat. They took a garret under the roof. She came to know the heavy work of the house, the hateful duties of the kitchen. She washed the plates, wearing out her pink nails on the coarse pottery and the bottoms of pans. She washed the dirty linen, the shirts and dishcloths, and hung them out to dry on a string. Every morning she took the dustbin down into the street and carried up the water, stopping on each landing to get her breath. And, clad like a poor woman, she went to the fruiterer, to the grocer, to the butcher, a basket on her arm, haggling, insulted, fighting for every wretched halfpenny of her money. Every month notes had to be paid off, others renewed, time gained. Her husband worked in the evenings at putting straight a merchant's accounts, and often at night he did copying at 2 halfpenny a page. And this life lasted 10 years. At the end of 10 years everything was paid off, everything, the usurer's charges, and the accumulation of superimposed interest. Madame Loisel looked old now. She had become like all other strong, hard, coarse women of poor households. Her hair was badly done, her skirts were awry, her hands were red. She spoke in a shrill voice, and the water slopped all over the floor when she scrubbed it. But sometimes when her husband was at the office, she sat down by the window and thought of that evening long ago, of the ball at which she had been so beautiful and so much admired. What would have happened if she had never lost those jewels? Who knows? Who knows? How strange life is, how fickle. How little is needed to ruin or to save. One Sunday, as she had gone for a walk along the Champs-Élysées to freshen herself after the labours of the week, she caught sight suddenly of a woman who was taking a child out for a walk. It was Madame Forestier, still young, still beautiful, still attractive. Madame Loisel was conscious of some emotion. Should she speak to her? Yes, certainly. And now that she had paid, she would tell her all. Why not? She went up to her. "Good morning, Jeanne." The other woman did not recognize her, and was surprised at being thus familiarly addressed by a poor woman. "But, Madame," she stammered, "I don't know. You must be making a mistake." "No, I am Mathilde Loisel." Her friend uttered a cry. "Oh, my poor Mathilde, how you have changed." "Yes, I've had some hard times since I saw you last, and many sorrows, and all on your account." "On my account? How was that?" "You remember the diamond necklace you lent me for the ball at the ministry?" "Yes. Well?" "Well, I lost it." "How could you?" "Why, you brought it back." "I brought you another one just like it, and for the last 10 years we have been paying for it. You realize it wasn't easy for us. We had no money. Well, it's paid for at last, and I'm glad indeed." Madame Forestier had halted. "You say you bought a diamond necklace to replace mine?" "Yes." "You hadn't noticed it. They were very much alike." And she smiled in proud and innocent happiness. Madame Forestier, deeply moved, took her 2 hands. "Oh, my poor Mathilde. But mine was imitation. It was worth, at the very most, 500 francs.
Let's first summarize what happens. Um, Madame and Mademoiselle Loisel, they come home from the party. She realizes that she's lost the necklace that was lent to her. The husband goes searching everywhere. He goes to newspapers, the police station, offers rewards, goes to the cab companies, hoping to find it. They don't. So they have to buy a replacement, believing that it's a real diamond necklace. They buy this replacement for 36,000 francs, which is so much money. We're talking like more than a house back then. And it ruins them. They have to borrow money from money lenders and mortgage brokers at extortionate rates. And because of that, they have to move into a smaller apartment. They have to get rid of their servant and do all the housework themselves. This ages Mathilde Loisel. This ages the woman. She becomes like one of those strong, hard-working, poor women, basically, of poor households. And eventually she bumps into her friend, Madame Fosterier, the woman who lent her the necklace, and the necklace was replaced. Now, this woman, Madame Fosterier, she doesn't even recognize Madame Loisel because Madame Loisel has aged so much. It comes to the end of it, and she says, it's me. I look this bad because of you. The necklace, I actually lost it. We bought you a replacement, and we've spent the last 10 years doing everything we can to try and make that money back. The final end of the story, the final part of the story, the last line is, but my necklace was imitation. It was worth at the very most 500 francs. So essentially, all of it was for nothing. You lost the necklace, you replaced it for a ridiculous amount of money, and if you were just honest, you'd have realized that it was an imitation. We could have sorted it out. Now, there's a lot to take away. There's various themes, various messages here. I highlighted one line in particular: how fickle life is, how little is needed to ruin us all, to ruin or save. This kind of theme of fate, and that it's such a fickle thing that we can become really rich or really poor, but just a small thing. There's also this idea as well that if she'd have just approached Madame Frostier and said, "I lost your necklace," "Oh, it's only a fake, 500 francs." So there's kind of this message of honesty. There's also a lot to be taken away on wealth and class systems and the rich and the poor. What do you think the author's ideas are about the wealthy and the poor? There's little things, obviously, describing Mathilde here, how she becomes hard and coarse like women of poor households. Now, if she becomes hard and strong, by definition, the poor are described as hard and strong. By definition, what are the weak? What are the rich described as then? They're described as obviously weak and dainty. So there's a lot you can take away from the author's point of view here. Um, Again, it says a lot about money lenders, I think. It says what it means to be rich. It says a lot about the work ethic of the poor. So let me know what themes and messages and morals you can take away from this story. There's obviously a lot of characterization, and the juxtaposition from the beginning of the story and the end is great. We see that Loisel, Madame Loisel, is a dynamic character. She definitely changes. She's definitely become this sort of hard-working character as opposed to this superficial, kind of lazy character at the beginning. So there's a lot to take away here. There's a few things as well I want to add on to. So there is at the beginning, I love this personification describing the carriages. They're only seen at dark as if they're ashamed by their shabbiness in the daylight. This kind of mirrors Madame Loisel, I think, who's also ashamed of her shabbiness. She remains in her evening clothes. She doesn't want to wear the coat when she leaves. Um, and then again, there is a lot here about the how this failure and the horrible weight and burden that finances can bring on us can age us, appall us. It falls on us. There's the um, there's a lot of repetition in this story as well. So see where you can find repetition. She went to the fruitier, the grocer, to the butcher, haggling and sort of fighting. There's a lot of repetition. So why do you think that was used? Possibly to show the hard work that goes into it, to build up the tension, maybe. And again, as I say, this really important quote, which denotes one of the themes. So let me know what you think. There's a bunch of themes to find. There's a lot of characterization. Let me know in the comments what you think of this story.